I'm so glad to be, this is my favorite subject. So I'm so happy to be speaking about this. So, and again, we have so much to share. And we have to start by thinking about a very bad professor. So what I would like you to do is just like find some couple of people who are sitting beside you, and we're going to watch a video. And what I want you to do is jot down however many things you can from within your group, like a word or something that reminds you of the bad thing you're seeing. And this is a little over a minute long, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to find bad things. So I'm going to play the video now. And once you group together, meanwhile, sort of find who you're going to be with. You got it consolidated? Okay. So you can start jotting down things, and then I'll give you a minute or two afterwards to kind of consolidate and see which group has the biggest list. Here we go.
My lecture today will give you an introduction to photosynthesis. Look at the panel on the right, I mean your left. You see that photosynthesis changes sunlight into chemical energy, splits water to liberate O2, and fixes CO2 into sugar. In plants and algae, photosynthesis takes place in the organelles called chloroplasts. You see a chloroplast on the right. Let's go deeper and look at the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis at the thylakoid membrane. The flow of electrons down the electron transport chain leads to the ultimate reduction of NADP to NADPH. In conclusion, you can note all of the following ideas. This should give you a good overview of this vitally important process.
So there we go. There is the bad professor. That's actually courtesy, my wonderful husband here. We had to actually reshoot that so many times because he was too good. But believe it or not, this is actually based on a worse real live instructor on a massive open online course from a world-leading university. And that is, I've, removed all identification, but the real lecture is even worse than what my husband is trying to convey. So take a few moments, kind of compare notes within the group, and let's see which group has the most. So I'll give you about 2 minutes here. Okay, so let's ask, how many groups got more than 5 things wrong? Most groups. Okay, how many groups more than 10 things wrong? Okay, any groups? How about more than 7 wrong? Okay, so we have, okay, so how many did your group get wrong? Okay, 8 or 9, okay, and your group? 9, okay, so we've got a definitive 9. And let's see, was there another group here? Seems like the sparky ones are up front here, at least for right now. Okay, so we've got 8. Okay, so from the group of 9, I salute you, that's fantastic. What are a few of those ideas? The tone was very monotonous. No idea the progression of content. Overwhelming stuff all at once for an introductory lecture. So not engaging the audience. So thank you, Mr. Phil. You've done a terrible job of teaching here, but you've actually taught through your teaching. What other ideas did any groups come up with? No eye contact. He was like pretty clearly reading from his teleprompter, and sometimes he'd just look off screen like he was so bored that, yeah, exactly right. Other ideas? Right? Exactly right. So he was making mistakes and not really, but here's related to this exact idea. Did you notice? So I'm going to exemplify, kind of emphasize what he was doing as well. As you can see on this illustration on my right here, you never point at something or indicate something without actually looking at it in real life. And one professor who my co-instructor Terry and I work with, he was like, "Oh, I'm so excited. I read your materials about how to do great online teaching, and so I created some great videos for my course," and he showed them to us. And he was going, "As you can see on these materials," I don't know if you've seen, let's see, it is not Breaking Bad, it is, so when Sheldon Cooper gets up with Big Bang Theory with Fun with Flags, and here is the flag on the, so when you're teaching, if you're ever, you want to be teaching with green screen because you can have them focus on exactly what you want them to be focusing on, but for heaven's sakes, always be very careful and point to things, but look at what you point at. And he was like getting away from that. He was actually kind of going, as you can see by your right, that is very unnatural as well, a fence post kind of approach to teaching. And that we learn through gestures. And if you are teaching courses where you only show your head, you are actually cutting out a lot of dramatic input that you could be giving your students, and we're going to talk about that more. Any other comments? Oh, he has like really rotten clothing on. That's a very good point. He deliberately dressed down, shall we say, and actually the real live person this is modeled off of was even worse. So, there's a subtle thing that he's doing too. And he was kind of going like this. And we tend to do this when we're nervous. We kind of do. And in class, it's not that big a deal. On video, it can get, like, you can get seasick watching somebody doing this stuff. I remember the first time I was ever on television, they put me on, and they put me in this swivel chair. So they put me on, and they had the little thing in your ear, and you're supposed to talk. And so I got a little nervous, and I started kind of going like this, and they're like, "Stop swiveling in the chair," you know. So that's when I really became, but it's like that for you. You want to avoid any kind of rocking motion, which is soothing, but actually can be problematic. So, another thing is, and this was pointed out, there's all this complex material behind him. We can tend to, like, we're super busy as instructors. So the last thing we want to do is take the time to take a little piece here and a little piece here and build a picture. We want to just like pop it up on the screen like it is in a textbook. Don't do that. You'll notice that even in my slides, what I normally do is I take a lot of time to piece by piece build up ideas. And it really helps people to chunk ideas if they have, they have a normal working memory capacity. So let's see, we got this, and we go here, and So I want a quick poll here. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to call out different things, and if that's your level of comfort with doing videos, just raise your hand because I want to get a feel for the audience. So if you are not at all comfortable with video making, raise your hand. So not at all, okay? And a little comfortable, okay? And rather comfortable, and very comfortable. Okay, so most people have at least a little familiarity, even if you don't think of yourself as video experts. That's good. So I am from Oakland University. People hear the word Oakland, and if they know a little bit about the United States, they might have heard that right by San Francisco, there's a city called Oakland. And so they think, oh, Barb, you're from California, right near San Francisco, palm trees, all this nice stuff. Well, no. Oakland University is actually in Michigan. So this is me going to work on a typical February day. I teach this course, Learning How to Learn, with Terry Sanowski. And he is pretty super brilliant. He lives in San Diego, as I'd mentioned before, and this is him going to work at his typical day job. I am so jealous of this man. So anyway, to my shock, I was asked to speak at Harvard, and I walked in and I got even more nervous because it was packed, standing room only. And I thought, why are there so many people here? It turns out our one little course made for virtually nothing in our basement actually had on the order of the same number of students as all of Harvard's online courses put together, made for millions of dollars with hundreds of people. So again, what this really tells you is that people are fascinated by new approaches, fresh approaches to understanding how we learn and how we remember. And this is coming from neuroscience. So with a nod and bow to cognitive psychology as well. So if you teach using metaphor, I remember when I was at Harvard, you want to know what happened? I walk in there and I give a little talk, and they're like, you want to know why your class is so popular? It's because you use metaphors and dumb things down. You make it too easy for your students. I'm like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing, is making things easier for our students? So using metaphors to make things simple so that they can more rapidly get to the more complicated things is what we should be doing as teachers. Now, I found something that's probably no surprise to anyone, that really good online courses have cheerful, friendly instructors, good use of metaphor and imagery, attention to video editing. And this is what I miss sometimes, as well as humor. I will give some examples of humor in this presentation. So we will have a little bit of fun. But one that is most often forgotten is this motion. If something is sitting there static in front of you, you will get bored. Your mind will wander. I don't care how compelling the words are. As you will see, the curse of film is anything that's moving will attract attention, but we can use that to our advantage. So the foundation of all teaching, especially online, is you. And it's also, there's something that neuroscientists really don't understand very well, but it's called the familiarity principle. And what this principle is The more often people see your happy face, the more familiar they become, the more they like you, and the more they become, they like what you're teaching. Now, you can say to me, what about Sal Khan? He teaches on Khan Academy, and he writes all these things, and we never see his face. But here is the key difference. People go to Sal Khan because they are already motivated. They want to learn how to solve a problem or understand a concept. And Sal Khan is a world-class leader in being able to explain things. So once people go, they get hooked and they really find it's very useful. But you can have people watch Sal Khan's videos. If they are not already motivated, they won't get hardly anything out of it. And you can try to say, watch Sal Khan's videos, it will explain it, but if they don't care. And so what your smiling face does is encourage students and help hook them. And we'll talk more about how this happens. So, but just keep in mind, like I have done videos where I showed my face, and I've done videos where I just did it Sal Khan style without showing my face. And you know what? Students always are more engaged with the videos that show my faces. They're more engaged in those classes. So keep in mind, your tendency is, it's so easy to film something and just do a screen capture and not show yourself. But that way lies danger, because your students can become, they'll like you better and they'll enjoy the course more if you're able to show your smiling face. Now, just a quick little bit of history. So MIT was the pioneer in filming classes and putting them online, and it's absolutely wonderful, this breakthrough approach. It's also super boring. You can see the guy is sitting there with his back to the class, slowly writing on it's, from a pedagogical perspective. Why do students watch this stuff? Simple. We've got them trapped in class. And they can't, get up and walk out. I mean, they're motivated enough to get into class, but once you've got them there, you can be a pretty boring teacher, and you can still kind of get away with it. Except that now, teaching is becoming a more competitive business. It used to be you'd have maybe one other or couple other sections that might be taught of the class you're teaching. Now people are beginning to be able to take other courses online where they may be able to get credit for things. So anyway, because of that boring back to the audience sort of thing, they decide, well, how about green screen that allows me to put bullets up, for example. I call this death by bullets because it can get really boring. Just da-da-da-da-da, you're talking away, you're facing the audience, but it's still very static. There's nothing unexpected, and the eye will begin to wander. So people are like, well, let's put in a picture. Well, the picture, what happens is, if you were there this morning, you know that working memory can only handle so much information. So if you are watching this guy and also trying to process the picture, you're trying to do two things at once, and it actually is heavier cognitive load. So this, again, is why I like green screen, because you can insert yourself right into your picture. You're standing in your heat exchanger, talking about how the heat goes out, for example, or, you can do unexpected things. And unexpected things also helps that dopamine to click in with the new learning. So there's also what I call bookcase in the background syndrome. So I'm going to exemplify this right here. So you can see that I mean, if I had a nickel for every professor that comes up and says, you know, I want to film some online videos, and I want it to be a little different, you know. I want it to show something intellectual, but, you know, be of a class in its own. They all put bookcases in, right? Because it's handy. So just be aware. I mean, bookcases can be okay, but sometimes you want to have very little clutter because you want them to really focus on things. Other times you may want to show things, but actually things that are relevant to you. Maybe, you know, a little bit about your family or something if you want to convey that you're also a family person, or awards, or whatever, you know, a little kind of thing about yourself you want to convey. But bookcases are just so often that it's kind of been done quite a bit. So another thing I'd like to kind of warn you about is online learning experts. I have seen probably one of the people who could be called the leading expert on online instruction in the world at one of the world's top 5 universities. And here's what he did online when he was teaching. He stood there, with half body for half an hour with a picture of his book beside him. And he taught for half an hour. Now, for those of you who were there for the morning's class, what is his experiential system, going to tell him, his procedural basal ganglia system? It's his experiences, his real lived experiences are going to be, teaching online is not very effective. It's because he doesn't teach very well online, but he doesn't realize that. He thinks it's the medium itself which isn't very good, instead of the fact that he's not using the online teaching medium very well. So how can you use it better? That's what we're going to be talking about. It involves judicious use of motion and lots of other little tricks. So we don't have cage students in our classrooms, not online, and we're competing. I mean, the world of online learning is a mixture of Silicon Valley with academia, with a little bit of Hollywood. So we gotta, and teachers have long said, well, I'm not here to entertain. Well, you may not be there to entertain, but you are there to at least grip them and get them interested in what you're studying or what you're teaching long enough to get them through the material. So sometimes there's this attitude that, MOOCs have low retention rates. Massive open online courses have lower retention rates, so we should get rid of them. They're not very good. Well, I would like to ask you, what do you think the completion rates of reading textbooks are? It's probably lower than online teaching, but we don't say, let's get rid of all textbooks. People come in, sometimes they take bits and pieces of what they're learning online, and also what they're learning online is, a lot of massive open online courses are free to start with. So it's the equivalent of saying, I'm going to go in a bookstore, pull something off a shelf, maybe put it back. And, we don't say, let's get rid of all bookstores because people just take a glance and then decide to move on. So just be aware, we have data for how many people are retained in online courses. We don't have data for how many people pick up a magazine in a bookstore and then put it back on the shelf. But we think one is better than the other just because we happen to have data. Also be aware that when writing first came out, all the experts in Babylon were like, this is terrible. if you write things down, you won't remember things. And there was a lot of, people were pretty upset because if you write things down, your memory will get, it won't be as good. You won't use it as much. That's true. So the reality is that everything has its trade-offs. And, for online learning, probably people are going to do just like with books. Oh, those are bad. They're going to replace us as teachers. Books did not replace teachers. And online materials can enhance teaching. It's much better to just use them to up your own game as a teacher than to worry so much about whether or not you're going to, there will be any further problems. There's so much to help you. Whatever you're teaching, look for really good online courses, and you will find new ideas to help you to up your own game. So what's the zeroth rule of making engaging online courses? It's to make a video. So having a video about the tougher aspects of whatever you're teaching about, having that available can really help your students. And you can make shorter videos or a little longer videos. Here's the thing that the mistake people, they think I'm gonna say, make a good video, but actually it's just like a bad video. You have my permission to make bad videos. And why I'm saying this is, the more you make videos, the more you'll start to get this sense of what is a good video, what is behind it. So just keep working. You can start with bad ones and then make good ones. But the big thing is, do not put a bunch of documents up on an online course. This is not good teaching. It's good teaching means, that you are explaining, that you're actually giving information. So, some of the worst online courses I've seen involve interviews and a bunch of documents, because interviews are really easy to film and documents are really easy to just throw online. So if you have that kind of online approach, you will have bad courses and people will sit and say, online teaching isn't as good as face-to-face, but it's not online teaching. That's not the real problem. The problem is that good online teaching approaches are not being used. I kid you not, I saw a paper that said I compared me teaching in class with what the students thought when I put a bunch of documents on online. And they liked me in class a lot better, so online teaching is bad. I mean, literally there is a published paper to that effect. So, just be aware. I mean, there's good online teaching, there's good face-to-face teaching, and they share a lot, although not all characteristics. So this is, I had mentioned this morning, a good way to make cheap online courses is to use your family members. So this is our older daughter, and she's modeling how to block out sound in order to focus more effectively. So you can see her here. She's in her kitchen, kind of modeling things. And oh no, it turns out she's got this big honking set of earphones on her lap, and she was willing to look kind of dorky for the camera. Now, hang on just a sec. So we filmed this thing, and the course, and we put it in the course Learning How to Learn. We had it up for about 3 months, And she was a medical school student at that time. So she goes into class, she sits down, there's about 70 other students, and the professor is this preeminent cardiologist from Southeast Michigan, and he's teaching the class. He suddenly stops the class, points right at her, and goes, you were the girl in the MOOC. And here's this very prestigious cardiologist who has no need to be, learning new things or going online, who had actually taken the course. You will be shocked when you really start doing good online courses. The outreach that you can have, the impact that you can have in your teaching is unbelievable. So, good online teaching it's hard to even imagine or tell you what the impact can be, in improving the lives of those who are around you here in Singapore and actually around the world. So, just kind of keep that in mind. The world is yours if you know how to make good online teaching materials. So I want to play a little bit of a video here. This is from my colleague, Terry Sanowski, and it gives you a sense of both mirroring and motivation.
In week 2 of our course, we describe what neuroscience at the movies expert Jeff Zaks has dubbed the mirror rule. This is when the whole brain becomes involved in subtly mimicking what we see others doing. It's almost like a dance team on one side of the stage that watches and mimics the motions of the dancers on the other side. As we saw with gestures, this mirrored neural activation can help us access our neural schemas for understanding the world. For our purposes, a particularly important aspect of the mirror rule is when we mimic facial expressions. Facial expressions seem to be particularly good at tapping into the network of neurons involving our emotions.
So when you're teaching online, your facial expressions can become even more important than when you're teaching in class. And I'll give you just a little bit of a sense of what's going on with conveying emotions. So this is a picture of somebody getting Botox injection. They noticed this weird thing about Botox. When they would inject it in people, the people would get happier. Like if they had been depressed, they were happier. And at first they thought, well, there must be something in Botox that's like an antidepressant. But they looked and looked more deeply. And what they found was when you have Botox injections, gets rid of the wrinkles, but it also makes it so you cannot frown very easily. And your facial, you think that your inside emotions are coming out and emerging with whatever that emotion is, like a frown. And that's true. But also, what is on the outside of your face goes in and affects how you feel. So if you have Botox, you can't frown very much, and actually they find that they start feeling happier because they find it harder to frown. So this also relates to studies where they've taken a pencil and they put a pencil in people's mouths. And what a pencil does is it makes you kind of smile. Done these studies and found that when you are forced to smile, you feel happier because of the forcing to smile, because your face is in this smile. And it's been very controversial research, but now there is actually something to that. What you manifest as your face actually is reflected inside in your neurons. But what happens is when you are teaching your students, you have your face, you are expressing it to your students watch your face, and their mirror neuron system, it's not like just a few mirror neurons, there's a whole system, a cognitive system involved. But that system, whatever your face is, inside, they start reflecting it. So through your hands, their hands will start kind of doing the same thing, even if only internally. They may not move their hands, but they're getting that same sense. And you, through your facial expressions and your gesticulations, are producing feelings within the student that, thoughts and feelings that can help them become more excited about the material. Think about the best teacher you ever had. The best teacher probably was really excited about what they taught. And that excitement got caught within you, and that may well be why you've even selected the discipline that you have chosen. So, your face and your hands in your teaching are incredibly important. And so I sometimes kind of have to laugh because they'll teach you all sorts of pedagogical theory, but they miss the foundational idea of you can't even get them on board and start getting them motivated if you can't convey, that sense of enthusiasm and passion. So sometimes I like to say that the camera subtracts like 10 charisma points. So what that means is, if you're super excited and super enthusiastic, as it goes through the camera, it just because it's small, because maybe you're only catching part of the body, it's going to have a bit less of an impact. That means you need to be over the top when you're teaching, especially online. Now, there's a chef in the US named Guy Fieri. And what Guy does is he goes around to rural restaurants and he meets, he creates television shows, episodes that kind of show whatever that rural restaurant is well known for. And so Guy Fieri goes out about 2 weeks before filming. And he's very normal. Hello, how are you? He meets people. And then he goes out 2 weeks later for the actual filming, and Guy Fieri is on fire. You can kind of see he's maybe a little over the top on fire right there. But he's really enthusiastic for that camera. And it catches. It helps to capture learners and get people excited. So notice the difference between him in his ordinary life and him in his, on-camera life. And that's when you're teaching online, you want to remember that excitement, that enthusiasm. So I was sitting in Japan a couple weeks ago in the back of a taxi. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the, they have the little television with the advertisements. Oh my word. It's like, they're getting all excited. And I mean, I don't know what it was, but I wanted to buy it too, And so they were using those expressive facial expressions to really get your mirror neuron to echo it. And that's kind of what you want to be doing too. Remember, everybody's got hardships in their life. They've got bad things happening, and when they come to your class, you are their momentary, kind of moment of excitement and enthusiasm and catching. Now, it may be exhausting for you, but for them, it really matters if you're upbeat and exciting, as opposed to my beloved husband who was Mr. Dreary as he was boringly teaching that class. So remember, you don't want to be like the bad teacher. You want to be over the, a little over the top, because you'll lose it through the camera, and then your students will actually love you for it. So it's a good thing. And remember that familiarity principle. As you're creating videos, the students will get to know you more and more. And also you can create videos about the stuff that's hardest, and that way students can, they always have it available. That's one of the great things about Singapore, is that you have been aware, even though every culture all the way around the world has its difficulties, Singapore, much more so than I think almost any other country, was aware that they needed to harden their educational system and have online learning materials available in case something like an epidemic happened. So if you're creating online materials, especially for the toughest stuff, you are not only helping your students who may have something happen in their lives, like, an illness in the family, an illness themselves, but you're also helping harden the system, the educational system, for in the event that something bad like SARS or some other kind of not so good thing might happen. So I want to give you just a few little things to be thinking about when you are, if you might be live or filming yourself on camera. So this is my friend Beth Rogowski, who is purposefully modeling here how not to show yourself on camera. So notice her face is all close up, and then you cannot see her hands. She's too close to camera. She also had a little glare on her glasses. And notice that there's, well, I kind of like this, that she has a logo of the university, which was nice in that during COVID time, students were missing the university, and it made them feel better. So now I am modeling overexposure. So there's overexposure there. And the big thing is I'm too low, and you can't see my hands fully. So my hands are cut off, and your tendency can be to center your head on the screen, but that leaves all this space above your head and little space for your hands. So now let's take my other colleague, Terry Sanowski, and Terry is modeling just right. So he has, his head is really towards the top, and you can see his hands quite nicely. So this is a perfect example of how to do it and how not to do it. The problem is that no matter how well you sit on the screen, and you get it adjusted when you're starting, here's what most people normally do. They start slouching, and then they're not properly at this. So you always have to, it's a never-ending habit to always be checking where are you on the camera, because you'll find that you slip off it. Now, I can tell you this, but remember I talked in the last session, if you were there, about the declarative system, which is when I'm explaining something to you face to face, versus the procedural system. This infralimbic cortex is saying, did I do this a lot? Because if you have done it a lot, then it will create new links of learning that relate to your habit. So, I can tell you something, and you will walk away from here, and will you remember to do it? Will you remember to sit back from your camera so that people can see your hands, if it's at all possible in your system? Maybe. But I have a good friend, her name, I'll call her Angela. So Angela said, she asked me for advice. I'd watched her on camera. Is there any feedback? And I said, well, yeah, you are terrific except for one thing. Here's what you do. You have your face too far forward so I can't see your hands. You need to be moving back, from the camera so that we can see your hands. Angela was like, great advice. I see exactly about this. And then the next time I saw Angela was right back up towards the front of the screen. So I taught her, I explained declaratively what she needed to do, but her habitual system took over. And so then she was right back with what felt comfortable, and she even gradually forgot what I had to say. So if, a thing to do is make a little sticky note and say, oh, sit back, hands, so they can see my hands, because those gestures will help activate the mirror neurons of your students. Now, here's another thing. Have you ever noticed that when you make a video, it makes you nervous to film yourself? A lot of people I know, including myself, get nervous about filming themselves on video. So here's a thing to remember, is if you can, try to focus on what you're teaching, on the camera, which is the students that you're talking to. If you focus internally, like on how nervous you are, it will activate the declarative system. And that declarative system will make you feel more uncomfortable, more nervous. If you instead focus externally on the target you're trying to reach, those students, it can help you to activate, instead of this declarative, you'll activate your procedural system. And then when you let go with whatever you're talking about or trying to teach, you can do it with less nervousness, so you actually, in some sense, hit the target more effectively. So a great way to help minimize your nervousness, either in front of the camera or in front of people altogether, is just focus on the audience, not on your own internal feelings, because that will help calm you down. Of course, breathing is really important, and I could probably spend an entire lecture on breathing, but if you have meditated, and I personally am not a meditator, I'm just an admirer of meditation and the great results from meditation. So one of the things that you can do with meditation is you're focusing on your breath. And so as you're breathing, what happens, you want to breathe in very deeply. So it seems almost as if the breath, you're trying to draw it down into the belly, even though that's not quite true, but you're just drawing air very deeply down into the lungs. If you draw it so it's very shallow there, you won't get enough oxygen, and you'll start feeling very stressed. And it has nothing to do with your actual stress, from, the nervousness of speaking in front of cameras or whatever. It has to do with the fact that your body is not getting enough oxygen because you're not breathing deeply enough. So I remember, should I tell you this? I was so nervous about speaking in front of my students, that I actually went into a therapist, because I would do this. Hello, how are you doing? I'm really nervous today, so I'm going to teach this, but I'm not sure. And my voice would get very high and squeaky because I was so nervous. And so the counselor was like, You need to learn to breathe deeply, grasshopper. And so I learned that the simple technique of breathing more deeply. We breathe shallowly because there's fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze means you don't even breathe because you're like trying not to move. But that's actually not a very good thing to do when you're trying to get enough oxygen in. So if you breathe deeply, and especially like, let's say you have to, has anyone done a TED Talk here? TED Talks are like terrifying. I know the president of the National Academy of Sciences in the US, and he was like, TED Talks are terrifying. I mean, here's this major guy, and he practiced for like 70 hours to do a TED Talk. And what happens, like before you go on, it's like this rush of adrenaline, and you're like, what do I do? If you breathe deeply before you go on stage, that minute or so when the panic is hitting, you'll find that you're much slower. If you have practiced, they always say practice 70 hours for a 20-minute TED Talk. And what that does is that makes your procedural system very comfortable. You can, like when I did a TED Talk, I was terrified, mind completely blank. You could have hung me upside down and I would still be saying exactly the same words because my mouth knew what to say because I practiced and learned it procedurally. So I guess those are, just kind of taking advantage. Sometimes just being in front of a camera can be a little nerve-wracking. And if you use these tricks to calm yourself down, it can be very helpful. Now, my husband will attest to the fact that my first videos that I ever made, I looked like I was staring down the barrel of a shotgun. I mean, I was terrified. And I looked like I was terrified. But it's kind of like flight time with airplanes. The more you practice, the more you start feeling comfortable. Now for me, it's like, the camera's my little buddy, and I think of it that way. And it's, and what's great is it's a buddy that never like gives you critical comments or something like that, So it's like, you need to say that again, or something. No, the camera will not. Other people may say that, but not the camera. So sometimes people ask me, what do I do with my hands on camera? Like if you're showing your hands. So I have what I call the pocket theory of hand gesture. And my pocket theory of hand gesture is that if you come from a country that has cold climates, you tend to put your hands in your pocket, and so then you don't know what to do with your hands. But it really varies around the world. Some cultures are like Italians. Oh my gosh, I could sit there for hours and just watch an Italian in the airport, explaining something. There's some cultures that are really, they use that hand gesture. So I want you to watch my friend Veronica Milla. She's going to be teaching in Spanish. Her use of hand gestures is really good. Not only is she moving her hands appropriately, a good thing to be thinking about is your elbows. So like a good friend of mine from Norway, here's how he teaches. Like this, he keeps his elbows and it had to be kind of like, no, you got. So if you're free and easy with your elbows, that can actually make it much easier to be free and easy with your hands. So we'll watch Veronica for just a minute. Maybe. Come on, Veronica. Oops. Okay, we'll go over here and we'll start.
¿Qué haces cuando no puedes resolver algo? Para los robots es muy fácil. Simplemente siguen estrellando sus cabezas contra el muro. Pero nuestros cerebros son mucho más complejos. Resulta ser que, si entiendes un poco sobre cómo funciona tu cerebro, puedes aprender más fácilmente y sentirte menos frustrado.
I mean, is that good? She's just really very natural. And so just remember that your hands are really important. And I know you're like, Barb, you're telling us all this stuff. Use your face, use your, hands. But as you practice, you will get more natural. So let's see, how can I say this? I have a friend who's Russian, and Russians are really serious when they're doing their teaching. And they're like, you do not mess around, you will learn this. The Soviet system is like this, you will learn. And so, so she was teaching, the language she was teaching, and she kept getting comments that, she was too demanding, too angry. And she's like, is it that I call on students, which is a typical Russian pedagogical approach? And I had watched her teaching her class, and it wasn't that she was calling on people. Can I say this? So there's a phenomenon called resting bitchy face. And what this is you can't help it, but like sometimes I just totally have resting bitchy face. It's when you're sitting there, you're calm, you're happy, and you look like you're really mad. That's just the calm feature of your face. And what she would do was when somebody gets something wrong, she'd call on somebody, she'd correct them, but she'd do it with resting bitchy face. And so she didn't know it, and she's like inside really, she's just trying to help them. And so what you want to do when you're teaching is like if you're correcting someone or you're saying something serious on the video, avoid this idea of, okay, this is really serious. What you do is something like, let me show you. So, see, look at my face right there. I'm not mad, but I look like I'm mad. I'm just explaining I went through my videos and I found this one place where I was explaining something and I was kind of, being serious about it, but I look like I'm being mad. So watch your face. Are you inadvertently, communicating? At first it's going to feel really bizarre if you have, a very serious look. It'll be like, you're trying to get yourself to smile, while you're correcting somebody, and it'll feel very odd and uncomfortable, but work on it, because as you're teaching, that you can inadvertently convey mirror neuron negativity that you don't really mean to convey. So, and just keep in mind that, like, I have taught some videos where I had the worst migraine. I almost never have migraines, but I had terrible migraines. I felt like hell. And I got up and I did my happy, and people will say, gosh, you were so upbeat on that video, and people can't tell. And so it really, just kind of power through when you're doing videos, and you think they can tell what you feel inside, but they can't. They can only see what's on your face. And here's another thing. Have you ever noticed that you might wake up in that day and something bad has happened, or it's just not a good day, and then you go to class and you teach and you feel better afterwards? A big part of why that happens is you're putting on the song and dance, you're being outgoing, and you actually infect yourself. You get yourself feeling better because you're smiling, and and after a while you begin smiling because you really do feel happier, even if at the beginning it didn't seem that way. So just a couple of, this is probably pretty typical for the kind of setups that you guys have. I've got adjustable lights. Some of you have nice curved screens. Notice, let's see. So here I've got, I'm using this as kind of a jury-rigged teleprompter right there. And let's see. So for lighting, sometimes lighting, there's nothing you can do. You're in a hotel room or something, and you have to make do with whatever the lighting is. It's always good to have some light in front of you. Don't sit with your back to the, window or something like that. If you can have two lights beside you, and maybe a dim light behind you, with that angelic look, right? And then another one is simply to have, like if you have a green screen beside you or behind you, put a light on the green screen to minimize the shadows that fall out on you, because of you. So if you're aware of the lighting, that can make it a lot better for your students. Part of the reason I think that students don't do so well when they're interacting on camera in Zoom rooms is many of them don't have good backgrounds, so you can't see their faces very well. They don't have good lighting and things. So even when they are interacting with one another, if they can see one another's gaze, they can get that dopamine hit of happiness when they see another person has responded to that, whatever was being said and so forth. But it's a lot harder to see if a student has a poor lighting setup. And sometimes there's just nothing we can do about that. Also, this is just to give you a little heads up about the importance of voice. There's a wonderful article there about voice. So if you look that up, so I'll just talk about this momentarily. Politicians often, especially politicians, female politicians who may tend to have a higher voice, they will often take elocution lessons to lower their voice. Because a high voice, think about it this way, high voice, you get on camera, you get a little nervous, it gets even higher, and it squeaks. And it's harsh and unpleasant to listen to. I know one person who, so finally, I sat her down and I said, you have a really grating voice, and I bet it's really hard for your students. She was aghast. And so she went home to her family and said, you know what Barb said she had? She said I had a really grating voice. And her family goes, finally, someone has told you about your voice. So be aware, your voice is actually a habitual, procedurally learned thing. You are probably not aware of how grating it can be if you do have a higher grating voice. And in that case, if you are able to deduce that you have this challenge, I highly recommend it is worth your while to go to a voice coach. So, and they will teach you, and this is what politicians, and you will see some politicians, especially female, who just naturally have higher voices. They will be in politics for a couple years, and they've clearly taken training, as discussed in that article, and their voice becomes a little deeper and more mellifluous. And just remember, children have really high squeaky voices, and they're not known as, sources of authority. So you don't have to be like this, but just making sure you're not too high-pitched, too childlike, can just help, especially when you're teaching. So, there's lots of information about good mics, so just beware whatever microphone you pick. I still remember I had a microphone like this, but I had it set up omnidirectionally for my class. And then I was recording at home. I recorded this spectacular lesson on Poisson. And I got done, and I was so proud. It's like, this is the best lecture ever. It was like 50 minutes. And I play it back. You can hear my husband snoring in the background. So just be a little aware, how directional is your mic? You can have headsets and so forth. Also be very, very aware, especially here in Singapore, of fans in the background. Air conditioners, fans, you think, oh, yeah, they can't pick it up. No, it really can affect. And remember how when Phil my hubby, was mumbling and it was hard to make out what he was saying? That's what air conditioners and fans can do as well. So this is just a very quick thing that you can take a picture of if you would like. This is Richard Meyer's multimedia theory. And Meyer he's the classic leader in the field and of multimedia teaching. A lot of what he says is so obvious that you go, nobody'd ever make that mistake. But if you look, almost every one of these mistakes is the mistake that we saw on that first video and that you can see in real live videos that are available from leading institutions worldwide. So even though these may seem very simple, like look at this, on-screen agents should display human-like gestures and movements. You're thinking that means, if you have a cartoon character, it should look more human-like. No, you can think of it as Phil, the bad professor, was sitting there and saying, as you can see on your left, no, I mean the right. That was very much like a robot. It wasn't human. A human would say, what's this? So one thing, we'll talk a little more about teleprompters. How are we doing? Let's see. I have until 3, right? Oh, we have 11 more minutes. Okay. So anyway, one thing that you'll find, maybe I'll wait until we get to teleprompters. People often think that 6 minutes is the be-all and end-all, that, there's a 6-minute rule. No, actually, what they did, so people think that, like, if they have a 60-minute lecture, that what they have to do is they have to break it up into 10 60-minute pieces, or 6-minute pieces. But you don't have to do that. In fact, you do not want to do that, because the study of movies shows that there's like events. There is a set concept maybe that you're teaching, and if you break it up in the middle of that concept, it's going to be harder for the student to capture that information. So breaking your videos up so that they cover a concept, but that concept can be anywhere between 6 and 25 minutes long. So as you can see here from, let's see, where's the, from Lagerström's paper, what the mistake people were making when it came to online learning was people would leave after 6 minutes, but then they would come back, and that was not actually studied in the initial papers that concluded that all videos should be like 6 minutes in length. So let's see. So I talked a little bit about mental models and events, and events involve things you hear, see, taste. They can be a scene in a movie, a key idea that you're teaching. That mental model is what you're developing, in our case, generally related to a key concept that you're trying to teach. So when you're creating videos, it can be a really good idea to basically have like the video starts, you have maybe maybe you just want to teach one concept, or in this case, I call a concept or one event and concept is the same, Or maybe you want to have several very much related concepts that you're teaching, but how you start that video and how you end that video matter. If you just cut it off in the middle of a concept, it's going to make that concept harder for a person to remember. So, you can break up, have sub-concepts in your videos, but it's important to make sure that you have concepts encapsulated within your videos. Now, a very, very important concept here relates to top-down processing and bottom-up processing. Top-down processing is when you go, oh, I'm going to make myself turn my attention to something. Bottom-up processing is this. We suddenly hear a tremendous bang from out in the hallway. We would all look in that direction. Bottom-up processing is when your attention is drawn to something because you have to. You can't look away. It is external, events drawing your attention. This brings us to what is called the tyranny of film. No matter what you are teaching and how compelling you are, if there's motion, people will look at the motion. And we see this in film. If you can have really important stuff going on that people are talking about, but as soon as you have something moving, it will draw people's attention. So what does this mean? When you have a class, if people are walking in, you'll see people's eyes just jump to whoever's walking in, no matter how exciting you are as a professor. Videos can be great because we can use the tyranny of film to attract people's attention through motion to what we want them to pay attention to. And then, it's not as likely that people are going to walk in and interrupt a video that's being shown, although, of course, it depends on the house. So this is like, you'll notice if you were like here or this morning, did you notice I had so much careful use of motion to keep your attention so that even though this morning was nearly 3 hours and now we have nearly an hour and a half, there's careful use of motion to try to, reduce and minimize that inevitable static sort of feeling of when things are very still. So I'll just give you a little more sense of why motion can be so helpful, especially looming motion. So this is me in the basement of my house. I really like this because look, I've got a nice haircut. My pants look kind of baggy though. So you'll find that you're always criticizing yourself online. That's perfectly natural. Everybody does it.
How do green screens work? Well, I just stand in front of it like this. Then we crop using a video editing program to get rid of the stuff on the edges. Then we stick whatever background we want behind me, just like the weather person at your local TV station. I can be in the jungle or in the city. We can even just stick in an animation from PowerPoint. Notice the infinite effect that we simulated by just draping the cloth gently forward. You might be surprised to learn that even top-notch MOOC-making facilities that I've toured around the world often don't have a full-length green screen. Why might a full-length green screen be important? Because from an evolutionary perspective, things that suddenly loom closer to you were more likely to kill you. So motion that appears to jump closer, as when you go from full body to half body on video, activates all sorts of neural attentional layers. Motion of all types, especially unexpected motion, really attracts attention.
So that just gives you a little sense. You can do stuff with your online videos that you cannot do in a classroom. you can do creative, insightful kinds of things that are really can help things stick. But when you're teaching, I want you to remember your face, your enthusiasm is infectious. It can make such a profound difference in helping your students want to go through your courses. So that's whether you're online or face-to-face. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for your attention. I have much more, but until next time. Oh, I should say there is an online course that that can help you to, like all the stuff I've missed, you can go and look. Let's see if oh gosh, well, let me just jump to the back. You can see I had so much more. And so I'll just show you that, and then we'll turn it back over to Sally here. Oh my God, you guys missed so much. Oh, I had to show you one little thing. Okay. So I hope you can forgive me. Just this is like so cool. Okay. So if you want to hook your viewers, so good hooks get students curious. So you're like, oh man. So they found that mice actually, they're little, if you inactivate their dopamine systems, they can't learn anything new. Dopamine systems, they squirt all through the brain. So let's say that you get your students to be a little curious about things. What happens is, like they're a little curious, they want to, figure this problem out. They try a certain approach, so no solution. They try another approach. They're a little curious. You got them a little curious about this problem. No solution. Another approach, no solution. They try again, and they solve the problem. And because they were just a little curious about it, they feel good when they solve the problem. And guess what it does? It squirts dopamine along that pathway that just allowed them to solve the problem. And this is how those links of learning are created. But here's more. If you get your students to be curious about what you're trying to teach, this is what happens. Remember the focused and diffuse modes of teaching? Because of that curiosity, they will actually suppress the diffuse mode and focus on you or what you're trying to teach on that video to such an extent that not only is that default mode network suppressed, but actually even the edges of their vision become sort of gray. They truly focus on what you want them to be learning. So it's just like, you can create great online materials that really help students learn. And with that, any questions?
The first question, are there specific keys to skills-based online teaching like design and technology classes?
So I think it's teaching skills-based, I spoke this morning about declarative and procedural systems. Skills-based is often more hands-on, it's more procedural, it needs more experiential, getting your hands on and doing it, that kind of thing. And so with that regard, interleaving, so like whatever that skill is that they're learning, not just repeating that same skill, whether it's how to hit a hotkey when they're doing programming, or they are learning a skill related to plumbing, that you want to practice with that skill and practice with related skills and kind of interleave, do it, not just alone. So, you know, I do think that skills-based learning with online teaching is really a lot like concept teaching. You need, you know, good images that will really help people sort of mentally model what's going on, seeing how the hands are doing things so that they can learn the same procedural skills. Those are all valuable, both, you know, for theoretical kinds of things and for practical skills-based training. The more you can show imagery and make people sort of realize the reality of what you're doing. Like when I was teaching electrical circuits, the more I would use a physical idea like a pump, a compressor, you know, the friction of a brake as being analogous to a resistor, the more you can bring real concepts to mind instead of any abstract ideas, the more people will really like it. So I think that may help.
Right. We have participants at the. Would you like to, pose the question?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Professor Oakley. Really enjoyed your sharing this morning and the afternoon. Could you just say something about humor and its possible link to maybe dopamine and
I gotta.
metaphors, if you can? Thank you.
Okay. Well, now that you mention it, so let me just, hang on just a sec. There we go. Okay. So they thought it was something bad. And in fact, Richard Meyer, his original work from like 1998 was like, humor is a seductive detail that detracts from learning. The problem is that they made that conclusion based on sticking an extraneous cartoon in a textbook. And nobody had actually looked at what does humor do within teaching. There's some pretty good evidence that when you have a little bit of humor sprinkled here and there throughout, it can help do momentary activations of that diffuse mode network that gives students a little bit of a mental break and allow them to return in a refreshed manner, even if it was just like 30 seconds or something like that. So I say people may not learn better with humor, but they're sure going to pick your course out over other courses if you have a little bit of humor in it. Now, the bottom line is that humor in online world does not mean you got to be sitting there being a comedian all the time. It just means that like once in every video, or maybe every 5 to 7 minutes, have something a little funny. And then what will happen is your students will be like rats, continuing to press the lever and watch what's going on, because they're looking for that humor, but they will get the things in between. So I'll give you a little example of humor from our teaching online course. So here we go. Oops, maybe. Oh, yeah, okay. If you had the choice of 2 different online courses, both good, but one of which had a little humor sprinkled here and there throughout, which would you choose? And which do you think most of today's typical learners would choose? So that's my co-instructor, David Joyner, who is the executive director for the computational, or it's their computer science online master's degree. Do you know that program that they developed, and why aren't you doing this here? You could do this here. They said everything's super expensive. Like Georgia Tech, their program, $40,000 to complete it, face-to-face. So they developed an online version of their program that is $600 for the entire master's program, and now this program has it's the largest master's program that anyone knows of anywhere in the world. You can get your Georgia Tech computer science degree, and it does not say online. It just says Georgia Tech. Which would you choose? 40,000. They still have a full complement of students coming for the in-person experience, but now they've got this enormous body of students because it is the largest online. It has captured 10% of the U.S. Market for online or for computer science master's degrees. So there is, if you make low-cost, high-quality online programs, you don't need to be Harvard. You don't need to be, you can really still dominate the world market. So thank you for that. Great question about humor. I have lots more examples to show you, but just little bits of humor organically integrated into your materials. For me, I often find a little bit of visual humor. Because especially if you have a population that may not be a native speaker of English or whatever language you're teaching in, if you have pictures, I'll show you one more. Okay, so let's see Terry. So this is Terry. He has just taught a 8-minute video on neurotransmitters and serotonin and so forth, and it's kind of really long and a bit tedious. So he is, this distinguished professor, internationally renowned, and this is what he does.
This brings us to zombies. Zombies can't learn. It is also clear from their behavior that they have brain damage, especially in the front of their cortex, which is the part that makes plans.
So he just had a little fun with it, So you can, it's the fact that he's this distinguished neuroscientist and actually comes back to Earth and says these things, people just love him. He's so, it really makes a difference with your students. If you're always thinking you're, the stiff whatever, but if you can break character, sometimes and really bring out your humorous side, everybody's got that side, it can be valuable for your teaching.
Next question. What's your take on breakout rooms discussion or any other interactive activity form if you don't recommend any of them?
I think that breakout sessions are really valuable if you are teaching live. They're invaluable because it gives students a chance to, if you have the time to, take a breath, go into diffuse mode, even if only while you're transitioning from, the professor to the breakout room. But also, there's a lot to be said for interacting. As I showed this morning, students can exchange ideas that are modeled by these birds. They can all get on the same idea, even if they're pulling things from different schemas or frameworks. And if a student might, have an idea that they're pulling from their schema through metaphor, for example, as you see right here, they're pulling an idea from their schema, sharing it with the students. They all can get this new idea. Well, if a student falls out of things, like that student up there, they kind of, they're mind wandering. The other students can get them back. Breakout sessions really help with this kind of thing. But at the same time, if you're using discussion forums, and I mentioned this a little bit this morning, but discussion forums, the problem is researchers who recommend discussion forums are often recommending them because discussion forums work really well for students who are motivated and want to use them. If you mandate use of discussion forums, It's not organic. What you'll do is see if you look, these, oops, no. So look right there. The students, like these orange ones, they are the ones who are really interested, organically motivated. But if you make everybody post, then you get a bunch of stuff that's like people just like putting stuff up because they have to, but it's not really useful. That means the ones who really care can't see one another or find one another's posts so easily. So discussion forums are good, but only, if the student wants to post in the discussion. Mandated discussion forums are not a good idea, except that here's one little trick I would sometimes use. So in massive open online courses, you have lots of people posting just because you have lots of students. If you have a class of like 50 students, a lot of them don't want to go post anything. So, but they will email you and say, how do you, I'm stuck on problem 42. So what you do is you say, oh, you're stuck? Write about your problem online and ask for hints. I do what's called a forced subscription in my forums. Then that means when this person posts, everybody gets the post. So odds are, the first time this happens, still, no one will answer. So I put in, after a day or two, I'll put a little comment in with a good hint that helps that student answer the question. But I'll add to this forced subscription, too bad no one volunteered to answer because I would have given extra credit. So then suddenly people will start asking questions and posting online instead of bugging you, and they will start helping one another as well. So that's a good hint.
Right, next question. What alternatives are there to forums on a MOOC? It would be great to build on social learning.
This is probably the biggest challenge. There was an app, and they wrote to me and said, we would really like to have interactive videos. So you can record your video and then you can see, another person can respond to your video, and maybe it's kind of like a real live interaction. It was a really great app, and nobody wanted to use it because you don't get that immediate gratification of you're smiling, you're saying something, then you see somebody like, oh, I got it. You don't get that when you're video recording. So what alternatives? It would be great to build on social learning, but the challenge is every single medium you use to teach with is going to have advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages of face-to-face is it's really easy to do social learning. However, what is social learning? It is in part, you are exchanging ideas, which is really good, but retrieval practice is really, really valuable for learning. So it's, just keep in mind that MOOCs, their forte thus far does not seem to be social learning in that it's asynchronous. You're not live. And so that can make it, just harder for social learning to take place. But if you look, a lot of online teaching involves things like, Python programming, or, there's a lot of, I'm trying to learn a skill. It can help to have interactions with social learning, but you can still learn that, and interact with others on discussion forums if that's where you want to go. So, I think MOOCs are still in infancy, but it's important to realize that when you are encouraging discussion forums on MOOCs, you're kind of pushing a rope. It's not really a very effective way. but we're not encouraging things like using retrieval practice apps. So we can do that, and that actually is a very good way, for people to learn more effectively. So the answer is, MOOCs are not necessary. Asynchronous MOOCs are not great places necessarily for social learning, at least from what I've seen so far. That could definitely change as things are developing. But a lot of learning, you get the social learning by watching dynamic professors, perhaps by, there is my co-instructor, David Joyner, wrote a great book called The Distributed Classroom. So if you are teaching in a massive scale, this is a way of teaching live, but also having it via remote, so you can really reach bigger audiences. So that's a good question. I don't think I can do justice really to it's a difficult topic that people are really grappling with.
The other question, can you share your most challenging experience faced during an online teaching session with live learners? What happened and how did you overcome it?
Oh, it's always the technology. You get on, you think, I'm supposed to be this big online learning expert. You start, and the power goes down all over town, or some kind of little glitch happens. So for me, the problems have always involved unexpected technology imps jumping in there and, messing up your microphone, or you start teaching, you've been teaching for 2 minutes, and then you find out that you are on mute and nobody told you. Those are, because other than that, I've never had really big challenges. I sit back, I use, my hands, I'm really expressive, so there's never been any kind of major disaster other than, loss of power and so forth. Do you know, one time I had to teach, I was going to teach, it was a massive auditorium just like this. It was in Iowa. Every other seat was spaced out, and it was COVID, so they were all masked. And I was supposed to give a 3-hour lecture live, and 1 minute before I was to begin, the power went out over all of southern Iowa, and I had to teach for 3 hours in the dark with no slides, to a masked audience with a little lantern here at the front. So you couldn't really see the reactions even. That was my toughest experience, but it wasn't online, so I haven't had anything that bad online yet.
Next question, how do you manage to get instant delayed gratification as an educator if the lessons are done in an asynchronous online mode?
Good question. I think of myself as an actress. Think about it this way. You can have a stage actress, and they get that audience, and they get the reaction. I'm a film actress. They film me. A film actress doesn't get immediate response, but you get kind of other ways of getting feedback from the audience. And so I'm kind of acting. And even as an actress, where I'm not sitting in front of an actual audience, but instead in front of cameras and my husband, to me, it's still quite gratifying. It's an art to me to be able to convey yourself, in an exciting way. The things that can happen are things like this. There's a fly in the studio. Yeah, have you ever tried it? Or a cricket starts chirping, So there are things that happen definitely in front, when you're filming privately that never happen in your regular classrooms, or rarely. But to me, it's still an art. And thinking about how am I going to convey these ideas? It's, how am I going to keep the magic of motion, that tyranny of film? To me, it's fun, because I'll be sitting there, you'll see me on film, and I'm going like this, and I'm talking about how you don't go like this when you're pointing to things like a giant frog, and then I look beside me, and I go, ah! Yeah, and the film editor put in a giant frog that looks like it's jumping towards me. It is like the coolest effect. But I was just imagining that. So it's fun. You're still creating art, even if you're not in front of the audience necessarily while you're creating that art.
Shall we do the last two questions, or?
Sure.
Can you please elaborate more about or give examples of event boundary?
Okay, so event boundaries, this idea of an event arose from movies. And that's a very deep and perceptive question. They started asking people to watch movies and say, when is the beginning of an event and when is the end? And people would say, what do you mean by an event? And they'd say, you figure it out. And people would watch. They have hundreds and hundreds of people watching movie excerpts. And sure enough, people would always have like the same ideas. This is where an event, whatever the event is, starts, and this is where the event stops. And, what was the event? It can be anything from, like a little scene where, the heiress is writing a letter, and then she places it in the mailbox. That was the event that was shown. But somehow, the brain kind of says, it segments, but we don't really know how. It says, this is the beginning of this event. This is the end of this event. She put it in an envelope and put it away, and you remember an event better than parts of events. So that's currently where the state of things are, as far as events. I would really, really like to know, more from a neuroscientific perspective what an event actually is. Probably if you ask some of the best neuroscientists involved in film, they can maybe give you a better sense. But all I know, now is just that it seems to be where something concludes and you remember it better than little bits and pieces of the event. So not a very good answer, but I think that neuroscience has much more to explore in this area. And I do think that movie making has so much insight that has really been little explored and that it will be incredibly valuable for education. Movies are designed to hook you, and we want to hook our students as well. So let's see, any tips on how to simplify complex concepts? Break it down. The more you can say, okay, for example, like if you had asked a school of education to produce a course on learning how to learn, they would have given you 3 weeks on the history of education, 3 more weeks on theories of education, 3 weeks on how babies learn, and then maybe a little bit at the end with maybe 1 lecture on neuroscience, because it's too difficult. So what Terry and I did was we turned that on its head. We started with neuroscience, and we used simple metaphors to help people understand these seemingly difficult concepts. So the more you can break things down into simple, easily identifiable events or key concepts and use a simple metaphor to do this, this is where the fact that I have a lesser capacity working memory can really help. Because like Terry, here's how Terry can explain things. Well, you just take this, he's holding it all in working memory, and then just kind of manipulate it, take the derivative, and here you go. And And I can't hold all that. I can hold smaller things. And so I simply, like I'll read a complicated paper and go, okay, yeah, but what's the gist? What's the important thing? What, you know, how can I simplify this into a picture that I can understand? Sometimes it's several, you know, events, but a lot of it is just like the forest. I mean, the trees, not looking back and seeing the forest. And what they've found indeed, and I didn't have time to cover this, but faster learners have really good memories. Slower learners have not so good memories. But what happens is because the faster learner can remember so much, it can be very difficult for them to abstract out the key ideas. They see all the beautiful trees, and it can be hard for them to say, okay, yeah, but what's the forest? What's the key idea? So just kind of drawing back, what's the key idea? Is there a way to make a metaphor out of it? Is there a way to convey it pictorially? If I have a complicated subject, as with the images in The Bad Professor, you break those images down, even if it takes you an extra hour to make that PowerPoint slide because you're building it piece by piece. That will really help students focus bit by bit on the key concept that you're trying to build and convey.